wake up today to be average. So why are we living that way? I truly do believe that God wants us to be wealthy. God desires for us to live our best. You can have everything that you want in this life. You can have the money, the family, the marriage, the business, the car, whatever it is that you want. You can have it. Wealth is your birthright. You deserve to be wealthy. These are the secrets of a money mogul, the keys to living an abundant life.
Hey moguls, welcome to another episode of the Secrets of a Money Mogul podcast. I'm your host, Jaleesa Ann, and this is episode 15. Y'all, this is like the first time that I actually turned on the mic and I was like not so sure about what I was going to talk about. I've been in prayer. I've been asking God, what is it that he wants me to do with this particular platform? Because my goal, as you guys know, if you guys are longtime listeners or if you're new here, my goal is to help 1 million women reach financial freedom within my lifetime. And I'm going to do that through different mediums, this podcast being one of them. But one of the things that I believe to my core, that I've learned from my mentor, that I've learned from studying, is that wealth starts in the mind. Wealth starts in who you are and who you become and who you're willing to become. And a lot of the reasons that people fail when they go on a financial freedom journey is because they are too focused on the exterior things or on the logical things like saving and budgeting and getting out of debt. And all those things are very, 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 very important. But at the same time, you have to become the type of person that, doesn't take on unnecessary debt. You have to become the type of person that is automatically a saver. You have to become the type of person that loves yourself enough to allow yourself to gain the success and the wealth that you really want to acquire. And that takes a lot of personal development. That takes a lot of time, a lot of healing, because what I've learned is that a lot of us are in our own way when it comes to acquiring wealth. We are our biggest barrier. And I think I did a podcast about that when I talked about the key to your success is you. But it just goes so much deeper than that. And I just truly believe that once you begin working on yourself, once you begin your personal development journey, once you begin your self-love journey, once you begin strengthening your relationship with God, then the wealth begins to come. Then it's easier for you to save. And I do think you do have to have a strong why. That's one thing that I teach my clients all the time, and I did an interview not too long ago, and the person that was interviewing me was saying like, well, what if you don't want to have a long-term why or a long-term goal, or you just kind of want to do something short-term right now? And I was explaining to her that doesn't work because it's not motivating enough. It's not motivating enough to keep you going when times get hard, because if any of you, and I'm assuming that you have, or that you're on a journey to financial freedom, if you're listening to this podcast, if any of you have gone on this journey, you know that times get hard. Times get hard. It's so funny that like the day you decide you want to go on a diet or something, your favorite food place sends you a coupon, or your favorite, your friend calls and asks you to go to your favorite restaurant. Isn't it like that's how it always happens? The day you decide that you're going to move on from an ex, or you're going to release a relationship that you should have been releasing a long time ago, all of a sudden that person calls you or does something that you've been wanting them to do for so long, and it like kind of sucks you back into it. And it's the same thing with your wealth journey. When it comes to your wealth journey, sometimes just at the moment we decide that we want to go after financial freedom, that we want to be wealthy, that we want to allow ourselves to be wealthy, all these things attack our finances. All these things attack us personally, and it throws us off track. And I don't know about you, but this year, I know we're only like a couple days into the year. It's still brand new. We're still in January. For those of you that are listening to this late, I am recording this in January, beginning of January. But I felt like the moment I set my goals for 2019, I immediately was hit with certain obstacles. I was immediately hit with self-doubt. I was immediately hit with whispers from the enemy telling me why I could not achieve those goals. And we just started. So what I want to talk about in today's podcast is, how do we begin to overcome that? What's really holding us back? What are the things that are really going to stop us from achieving our goals this year? And I want to talk about two things specifically that are holding us back. And when I say us, I'm talking about me too, because you guys know I'm on this journey with you. I'm on a goal. I'm on a journey to not just reach 1 million people, but reach $1 million. You know, I want to be a multi-millionaire so that I can give more than I've ever given, you know, so that I really feel like when you live an abundant life, you have so much more to give those people around you. And I grew up, I'm sure if you listen to this podcast, you know my story, but I grew up not having money. So I already know what it's like to not have money. I already know what it's like to be in debt. I already know what it's like, you know, to go through real financial hardships and, you know, be evicted and things like that. I know what all of that is like, you know, not to be able to put food on the table. I know what that's like. But I want to know what it's like on the other side, you know. And I've done well for myself the last couple of years. I won't say that I've struggled per se, but I have made some financial mistakes, and I continue to not be perfect, and I'm never going to be perfect. And I don't ask God for perfection, because I know that in those mistakes are lessons that he wants me to teach other people and teach other women. And, there's so many people that have learned from my mistakes that they don't have to learn mistakes too. So today I'm going to talk to you about the two things that could be holding you back from reaching your goals this year. So we'll get into that right now. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the real reason that you're not achieving your goals, and the real reason that you're not achieving your New Year's resolution. And this one thing is holding you back. And we're going to talk about two forms of this thing. But what I want to talk to you today about is fear. I don't know if any of you guys are just perfect. I don't know if any of you guys have never dealt with this. I highly doubt it. But I believe that everybody faces fear, and fear is actually here to protect us, because if we were not frightened by certain things, we may walk into a dangerous situation prior to, you know, the world becoming like the way that it is now. Like when man lived out in nature, our fear is what kept us safe. So it's a natural instinct. You know, our fear tells us not to jump off a cliff, because we're fearful for what would happen on the other side, right? So fear can be a good thing because it can keep us safe, but fear can also keep us so safe that it keeps us from our goals, that it keeps us stagnant, that it keeps us from going after the things that we really love, that it keeps us from taking the leap of faith and starting that business or applying for that new job or anything that we may need to do to progress. So the real reason that you're not achieving your goal is fear. I meet so many women who have all the potential that they have. I mean, they have everything that they need to be successful with them already. They don't need another course. They don't need another degree. They don't need another few years of experience. They already have everything that they need to be successful. And I know that that's true for me too. God has already blessed me with everything that I need to be successful. He has literally given me the keys to success, the tools that I need. But one of the things that clearly holds me back, and I'm sure that it may be something that you struggle with too, is fear. And two very specific fears. The first fear that I struggle with, and that many of my clients struggle with, is the fear of failure. The fear of failure. Now, the fear of failure, I always like to say that the fear of failure is more about the fear of what other people think. Because I found through my research, through coaching, through my own personal life, that this fear is deeply rooted in what people will think, or how people will treat me, or if I will be rejected. And I know that that is one of the things that has truly held me back in the past, especially when it comes to business, because putting yourself out there, like on the internet, on a podcast, just in general is frightening, because not only do you open yourself up to criticism from strangers and people that you've never met, but you open yourself up to criticism from the people that you do know, the people that you do love. And this particular fear was one of the things that was truly holding me back, because I was so fearful of other people's opinions of me. And it was easy for me to say, oh, I don't care what people think. The only person's opinion that matters to me is God's, or my family's, or the people that love me. And it was easy for me to speak that with my mouth, but my actions were saying differently. I was very afraid to kind of put myself out there. I was very afraid to be present. I was very afraid to kind of walk in my gifts and teach the things that I know that I should be teaching. And one of those things, and one of the things that I notice is that we don't necessarily fear failure. We fear how failure is going to be perceived. We fear how we might be talked about, or rejected, or ridiculed, or exiled when we fail. We fear what other people will think. And overcoming that fear really takes a lot of personal development, a lot of prayer, a lot of time getting comfortable with yourself, and then realizing that failure is not finite, right? It's not the end. There are plenty of people who have failed. There are plenty of people who have fallen flat on their face, and it's like, if they had stopped at that point, they never would have succeeded. Like one story that comes to mind right now as I'm recording this podcast is Steve Jobs. So if you guys don't know, I mentioned this story quite a bit, but one of the things that happened with Steve Jobs, who is the founder of Apple, for those of you guys who don't know who he is, he was fired from his own company. When he created Apple, they fired him. And he was fired from his own company. Like, can you imagine the shame to be fired from your own company, the company that you created? And one thing that Steve Jobs didn't do was, when he was fired, he did not give up. Like, he made a plan, he stuck with it, and he went and founded 2 other companies, one of those being Picstar. And he made those companies successful. And essentially, he made those companies, everything that he put into those companies was everything that Apple needed. So it came to a point where Apple had to acquire his new companies that he had created, just so they wouldn't become bankrupt. Is that not crazy? Like, sometimes when we talk about Apple and we talk about it being such a successful company and having, a big share in the marketplace, we don't talk about that particular failure, because at this point it doesn't matter. He's already succeeded. He's already come back and accomplished his goals. So who cares that he was fired by his own company? But it's a vital it's a vital piece to this story, because if we leave out the failures, we think that it has to be perfect. We think that the journey has to be perfect. We think that every step is going to be, rainbows and sunshines. And that's not what it is. That's not how it is at all. We have to expect that in life, sometimes we are going to have these failures. Sometimes we might get fired from our own company. I mean, hopefully not, but there are things that happen like that, to that magnitude. And one thing we can't do is give up. And I'm speaking my own sermon right here, because those of you who know me know that there are plenty of times I want to give up. I want to quit. I want to not show up at all. And I remember talking to one of my mentors about this, and she was saying you have to think of it as like a hurdle race. So I used to run track. I don't know if any of you guys used to run track, but I didn't run hurdles. I was just a sprinter. But when I was talking to my mentor about this, she was talking about the hurdles, and she was saying when you're running a race, it's like you're running a race and you're running hurdles. And she's like, you clear the first hurdle, you clear the second hurdle, you clear the third hurdle, but you kind of trip a little bit and the hurdle falls. And then she said, you get to the fourth hurdle and you stumble, you fall. But instead of getting up and finishing the race, like most hurdlers do when this situation happens, because it's very common, you just sit there. You just sit there. And she was like, sometimes we just sit there and, we move our arms and we kind of flail around and we kind of make it seem like we're doing something. But really, we're just sitting there. We're just stuck in that moment, stuck in that emotion. And we're stuck there. And it's all about being able to get back up after you fall, get back up after you hit that fourth hurdle, and not care what people have to say about it. Know that failure is not optional. We will fail at some point. Whether it's a major failure, whether it's a smaller failure. I can't tell you guys how many webinars I've done where I've had technical difficulties. The video has gone out. The audio didn't work quite right. But I cannot tell you how many people emailed me afterwards, how many testimonials I've gotten afterwards about the breakthroughs that people got through the information, even through the technical difficulties, even though to me it might have seemed like a complete failure. I remember when I launched my membership site, back when I had a membership site, the whole site went down on launch day, the whole site. And I did this whole webinar prep. I had this fantastic webinar to present, and it might actually still be on YouTube. I'm not sure. But anyways, I did the webinar and I had nowhere to send people to because the site was down. The membership site was not working. And that was a major failure for me. But once the site did get up, once I sent the email out, people began to sign up for the site. So what would have happened had I have just quit? Had I have just let that fear overcome me? Had I have let that fear of rejection overcome me? Y'all know a lot of the reason that it took me so long to start this podcast was fear. And a lot of that fear was fear of what people would think, the fear of failure, fear of how failure would be perceived. What will people say about me? What will they think? Right? So overcoming that fear is a necessity to success. If you are wanting to achieve your goals in this year, in next year, in the next 5 years, at any point in time, you have got to overcome your fear of failure. So the second fear we're going to talk about is a fear that I don't feel like this fear is widely discussed, but it's a fear that I know for a fact that I have struggled with, and that is fear of success. Fear of success. I think that, at times We are truly afraid of what would happen if we allowed ourselves to really reach the potential, really reach the level that God wants to take us to, really achieve the goals and the dreams that we really do have. I think we fear what would happen. And I know for a fact that I feared that. What would happen if my business was really wildly successful? What would happen if I was nationally well known? And I think fear of success is rooted in what's called imposter syndrome. So if you guys do not know what imposter syndrome imposter syndrome is like this fear that you're not good enough, or that people will find out that you're a fraud or something to the likes of that. Actually, the real definition of imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. And that is imposter syndrome. And I know a lot of very successful women. I know a lot of people who are in business who have this syndrome. And what's crazy is that when you look at these women, you're like, you're brilliant, you're beautiful, you get results for your clients. Like, why would you feel that you are not good enough, or that you're going to be exposed as a fraud? It's not like you're out here really defrauding people, but that is a real fear that we have. It's like we devalue our gifts. It's like other people see value in our gifts, and we allow other people to kind of what I like to call prostitute our gifts, use our gifts for their own personal gain or their own personal financial gain, or allowing companies to use our gifts for their own personal financial gain. But when it comes to us using our gifts for whatever reason, we believe that we're not good enough. And the more I read about imposter syndrome and the fear of success, the more I realize that the last 2 years in business, this is the single thing that has held me back tremendously. And one of the things that helps you overcome this is like a brag board. Sometimes we just have to brag on ourselves. Sometimes we have to brag on the things that we have done that other people have not done, on the accomplishments that we have set out to accomplish, of the books that we have read, of the studies that we have done, of the people that we have helped. I mean, how many of you guys have helped your friends, your family through situations that no one else could help them through? How many of us have helped our family through financial situations, or have given advice that has really changed the trajectory of someone's life? How many of us have done that? And it's like we forget about those things. And I think it's necessary for us to sometimes brag on ourselves, keep some type of journal, keep some type of document or some type of list of all the things that you have done, all the people that you have helped, all the times you have stepped out and been successful, so that when imposter syndrome does come in, when we begin to doubt ourselves, when we begin to doubt our calling, we can use that to combat that. We can use that to say, not today. Not today, enemy. You are not going to get in my head and make it seem that I'm not good enough, because I know for a fact I help women. I help people. I am the best hairdresser ever, whatever. I sell the best product. I don't know what it is that you do. I don't know who all is listening to this, but being secure, being confident in not only what you do and what you can do for other people, what service you offer, but who you are. Don't ever forget that you are a child of the Most High, and it is your duty. It's funny because I had a mentor tell me, I think, I was just like I think it's popular to be like, oh, I'm just trying to chase my purpose. And, I'm just trying to live in my purpose. And I'm just trying to, I don't know. I'm just trying to live out my purpose, right? And one of my mentors was like, your purpose is to reach your full potential. Your purpose is to be all that you were called to be. Your purpose is to step out and do the things that God has called you to do, whether you fear them or not, whether people are going to talk about you or not, and really, really go after those things. So part of your mission might be to empower women financially, but your purpose should always be to reach your full potential. And I remember thinking like, oh, okay, like that kind of makes it easier. Like my purpose is always going to be to reach my full potential, to do all that God has called me to do, to leave nothing on the table when it's time to leave this earth, to feel like I have done it all and hear God say, well done, my good and faithful servant. And that's the goal. So I'm committed to that goal, not necessarily how I get there. I'm committed to I'm committed to reaching my full potential, but I'm not committed to a particular journey. I'm not committed to this podcast. Wait, I don't mean to say that like I did not mean to say it like that, guys. I am committed to this podcast actually, because this is what God has told me to do. But in the event that it no longer works for my business structure, in the event that God calls me to do something else, I can't be so committed to it that it will hold me back. You can't be so committed to a job. You can't be so committed to a relationship. You can't be so committed to a friendship, to a social media, to whatever it is, that it holds you back, that it keeps you from doing the things that you need to be doing. And I say that I'm not committed to this podcast only to say that you can't be so committed that you won't move forward if God tells you to move, or that you won't step out on faith and do something else. Say, what if a new platform comes out tomorrow and, I feel led to start something on that platform? That's what I need to be doing. So imposter syndrome is definitely something that I've struggled with in the past. It's something that I still struggle with, and it's something that I am constantly overcoming. And I'm sorry if you guys can hear my dog, because he's just decided that he wants to bark as I'm recording this podcast. That's life. But another one of the ways that you combat imposter syndrome is, or another one of the ways that you overcome fear of success or imposter syndrome is to write down what would happen if you really were wildly successful. What is it that you fear? What is it that is holding you back? And one of the things for me was that I don't financially support all of my family. Let me not sit up here and lie, but I have financially supported some members of my family. And for me, I knew that becoming wildly successful, or becoming, my business really blowing up the way that I know that God wants it to blow up, my fear is that people are going to look at me like the bank. And sometimes I'm a little bit too nice. I'm learning how to set boundaries in this year. And last year was really the 2 years that I'm really learning how to set boundaries, really learning how to tell people no. And I know that if those boundaries are not in place, I will literally get taken advantage of by people that say that they love me. And for me, that's a real fear. And it's a fear that I know that I had to overcome. So take time to journal, maybe this week, maybe even right now, if you have the time and you're not driving and you have the time to just get a piece of paper and just write down, what does success look like for me? What is it that I truly fear? If I became wildly successful, what would be a negative or something that would be holding me back? So I want you guys to do that this week and definitely kind of get to the root cause of that. I know that it's something that I'm working on. Like the hurdle thing that I was telling you guys earlier about, like, not, finishing the race, not just sitting down when you get knocked down while running your race, when the hurdle kind of just like makes you stumble and fall on your face. That's something that I'm working on. And I'm transparent enough to let you guys know that I'm not perfect. I don't even pretend to be perfect. I think I'm the most imperfect person ever. I'm probably a lot harder on myself than anyone else is on me. And I think that's part of where my imposter syndrome comes from. Is that I'm just really so hard on myself. But that's really all that I have for you guys today. Like, I don't have a lot to talk about. Like I told you guys when I started this podcast, I didn't know what I was going to talk about exactly today. So hopefully you guys got some value out of this. Rate and subscribe. Please rate and subscribe, guys. That helps other people find out about the podcast. Also share with your friends, share on social media. Be sure to tag me. Check out the show notes for any links, to any social media, and I always include links in the show notes, so be sure to check those out. And I thank you guys for being a listener, being a subscriber. If you're new here, welcome to the Secrets of a Money Mogul podcast. Come on back and hang out with us. We talk money, we talk wealth, we talk personal development, and we talk motivation. So thank y'all. Have a great day, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.